Welcome back to the Early Weigh-In Podcast. This week we'll be breaking down UFC Vegas 38, Thiago Santos versus Johnny Walker. Go ahead and give a like to this video and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. This week you are stuck with me. It's vacation time for the Early Weigh-In Podcast, so I am taking over this week. And finally got me wearing the casual cap on camera, not just the picture. We'll go on to last week's card where we did end up going minus 0.17 units. We put together an awesome parlay with Jessica Andrade and Matthew Semmelsberger, who both ended up finishing in the first round. And we thought that it was going to be smooth sailing going into the Blades versus Rosenstruik fight. We got an excellent line on that fight, doesn't go the distance, and of course the heavyweights see the judges. It's a fight card that I think both Preston and myself are kind of kicking ourselves in the butt for not going a little bit harder on, because we both ended up having pretty successful nights, personally. But it is what it is. We didn't overextend, and again, we're minimizing the losses by not overextending. That being said, we have a absolute hammer this week already, where we've released the Niko price money line at minus 140 for 4 units. The biggest bet that we've made since Conor McGregor and Dustin Poirier in their first fight. So hopefully this one doesn't bite us in the ass either. We kick off the card with an interesting fight in the men's bantamweight division between Alejandro Perez and Johnny Eduardo. Between both these guys, I was a little bit surprised with the amount of experience they've had in the UFC. On the Eduardo side, he's been in the UFC for a decade, but only has 7 fights. And then on the Alejandro Perez side, he has 11 fights in the UFC. And he's fought some pretty legit guys. He has wins over guys like Yuri Alcantara and Eddie Wineland. But he is currently riding an L2 right now between Song Yadong and Cody Stamann. I will say, though, he definitely had some success against Cody Stamann, and in places that definitely surprised me. The single leg specifically, extremely explosive with that single leg takedown. He had a good inside leg kick, and you could just tell that his style, he uses a lot of explosion in his takedowns and his striking. And I could see this one being an absolute banger, because you look at the Johnny Eduardo side, he has solid takedowns of himself. He also has extremely explosive striking, heavy leg kicks, and he's really, really fast. All that being said, he's 1-3 in his last 4, and again, steep competition between Aljamain Sterling and Nathaniel Wood, but 41 years old, I think his best years are behind him, and fighting once a year just isn't going to cut it, I think the UFC is definitely thinking that this is Perez's opportunity to get back on track, and this might be a situation where Eduardo is kind of fighting for his job here. I'm going to take Perez here, but I don't think that him being a 2-1 favorite whenever, he's shown that he's got some holes in his game as well, is really justified here. So I'm going to lay off this fight. I think that there's a lot of better spots to bet, but I will take Perez in this spot. Our next fight takes place in women's bantamweight, where we see Shanna Young, who's 7-3, taking on Stephanie Eggar, who's 5-2. Shanna Young, she's fighting out of Knoxville, Tennessee. She's training at a Knox Martial Arts Academy. Her losses are to only legit girls. You go down the list: Macy, Chiason, Miranda Maverick, Sarah Alpar. Those 3 girls are all in the UFC. That being said, she's getting kind of dominated. I don't blame her too much in that Macy Chiason fight, as it was short notice. But in both the Sarah Alpar fight and the Miranda Maverick fight, she showed some pretty bad holes in her grappling defense. And that's not something that you want to have against somebody like Stephanie Eggar, who is a judo black belt. She's been doing that since she was 5 years old. Usually Stephanie Eggar looks to get it to the ground so that she can implement her game plan, and I think that she's going to look to do that again. She debuted against Cortez and looked pretty bad. I know Preston and I both were backing her in that fight, and it did not look good. Cortez continued to get the better of the scrambles, and it was a little, it's tough to back her right now. She opened as the underdog, and we've now seen the money nearly flipped the line completely. She opened as a plus 130, and now she's a minus 120. I get it. Stylistically, I think that she's a problem for Shanna Young, who, usually goes to the ground in her fights and has shown grappling problems. I just can't trust that Stephanie Eggar's judo is going to translate. I'm almost positive Cindy Dandois is like a judo black belt or has some similar credentials to Stephanie Eggar, and it just doesn't translate. She's not strong enough or something, and Shanna's built like a tank. I think that Shanna has the striking edge here, and as she creeps up into that underdog range, I'm more tempted to play her, although, again, a lot more spots on this card that I like better than this fight. So I'm gonna lean young here. It might be a little bit biased because I did get burned on Eggar last time, so take it for what it's worth. Our next fight takes place in the men's bantamweight division, where we see Douglas de Andrade taking on Gaetano Pirrello. This one is one of the fights that I've been texting Preston about all week. I really like the under in this fight. It's sitting at plus money right now, and I think that the bookies are way off. You know, I believe that Andrade is kind of getting a bad rap because of his most recent fights, which have been extremely difficult. We're talking about guys like Rob Font, Marlon Vera, Piotr Jan, Lerone Murphy in his latest fight. And I think it's kind of robbing him, or robbing the people, of how explosive and powerful and full of highlight reels Andrade actually is. You know, those are really tough guys to showcase your striking skills against. So, and then Pirrello, you look at his side, man, you know, tough debut against Ricky Simone, I gotta say. But you take a look at his regional scene, and this guy only knows go. You know, 20 of his 22 fights have either ended in him getting finished or him finishing somebody. And I don't think it stops here. You know, I gotta think that he's looking to make an impact here. And with Andrade, you know, I don't think that this fight is for pink slips for him. You know, I think the UFC understands that they've kind of given him the shit into the stick, but he's 36 years old, and he's gonna need this fight right here. I don't expect either guy to be timid out there by any means. Pirrello, the majority of his losses come by submission, and although Andrade doesn't have a ton of submissions, he is a Brazilian, and in that Lerone Murphy fight, while he was still fresh, he took Lerone Murphy's back in the first round, and you saw that he still has it, you know, especially while they're fresh. I think this fight ends in the first round, but I'm more than happy to take that under 2.5 at plus money where it sits now. We got a great fight in the lightweight division up next between Jamey Mullarkey and Devonte Smith. Jamey Mullarkey is one of those guys that the Early Weigh-In podcast likes to back. This will not be that type of week for him. In his last fight against Kama Worthy, we definitely thought that Kama was the hype train that he is, and Mullarkey derailed that for sure. We also took him in the Frost Ziem fight. I still to this day think he got robbed, and you know, I'll probably hold to that. He's one of those guys that you know, he gets beat up even when he wins. He needs that takedown to kind of get his game going, and I say that even though he proved otherwise in his last fight against Kama Worthy, but traditionally he would much rather get that fight to the ground for him to kind of implement his game plan. On the Devonte Smith side, we're kind of finally seeing him come back from that Achilles injury after that terrible upset loss to Kama Worthy, who kind of started this hype train. So full circle, we'll kind of get to see, in my opinion, Devonte Smith show that was a fluke and that he's much better than that. He's the way more athletic guy, way faster. Honestly, he's got 100% takedown defense, but in his 5 fights, he really hasn't had to use it at all. I think that we could see a very similar finish to Devonte Smith's fight on the Contender Series, where the guy was almost desperate for takedowns, and he kind of stayed head to the side up against the fence on a takedown attempt for a little bit too long, and Devonte Smith was able to kind of utilize that reach of his to throw the elbows and get the finish. I think that it'll go somewhat similar, same way with the Johnny Walker versus Ryan Spann fight. I think it'll go somewhat similar to that. Devonte Smith, much more athletic. I think he'll touch up Mullarkey. Unless Mullarkey, you know, tests Devonte Smith's takedown defense like nobody else has, and proves that he has holes in there, I got to think that this is a relatively easy night for somebody like Devonte Smith. Our next fight is one that I do not plan on spending much time on. It takes place in the women's bantamweight division between Karol Rosa and Bethe Correia. Karol Rosa is one of those fighters who I do think has a future in the UFC. She's only 26 years old, and you see every single fight she's making improvements in the areas that she needs to make them in, especially that striking realm. Because the majority of the time, if Karol Rosa's winning, it's when she can implement her grappling. She does really, really well in those situations. Then going on to the Bethe Correia side, her last fight with Pannie Kianzad kind of did it in for me, man. You know, I haven't always been a huge Bethe Correia backer. I've always hated that stupid intro that she does with the whip. And, man, she bites on feints. She doesn't have great head movement. She's kind of slow. Doesn't have the wrestling to get it to the ground, where if she is on top, she can be a problem. But she just ain't got it. And she's 38 years old. I think Karol Rosa is going to roll through her. It'll probably be a decision win. But yeah, I don't see very many ways that Bethe is going to find success here. If she winds up on top for whatever reason, that's where she has the advantage. But I think everywhere else, Karol Rosa is gonna either piece her up or ride her out for 3 rounds. Our next fight takes place in the women's flyweight division, where we see Antonina Schevchenko taking on King Casey O'Neill. Antonina Schevchenko, you know, a lot of people are starting to jump on that train. I mean, a Schevchenko at a 2-1 underdog is, you know, it sounds weird. I do think that line's a little bit wide, and I understand why people are playing it. But I do think that she's at a disadvantage here. You know, Schevchenko definitely has some holes in her game, and I think that it's mostly surrounded by her grappling. She's got worked in her last fight against Andrea Lee, and it was tough to see because you thought that Schevchenko might have been, you know, making those changes to her game and rounding out her game. But at 36 years old, I do think that we're far less likely to see big changes, big jumps in her game. And kind of what you see is what you get as far as her takedown defense, which is currently sitting at 50% right now in the UFC. Where she shines and where you can see like sparks of that Schevchenko bloodline is in her stand-up. She's an 11-time Muay Thai world champion, but she's a little weak. She doesn't handle pressure as well, and when grappling's involved, her striking is definitely limited. In comes Casey O'Neill, who's undefeated in her professional career, 2-0 in the UFC, and is currently getting work out of the best gym that she's ever trained at in Extreme Couture. Originally, I was kind of an O'Neill hater. I knew that she was getting some favorable matchups with her dad being involved in the promotions that she was fighting for on the regional scene. But I do think that we're going to see tons and tons of improvements fight to fight from Casey O'Neill, where, you know, just because in that last fight with Laura Procopio she got taken down a couple of times, I don't think that that's indicative of how her career trajectory will be in the future. You know, one thing that she does have that you need in the UFC is great cardio, and you saw her tough through a lot of situations in that Procopio fight. She has good knees in the clinch. She has good combos. She doesn't move her head extremely well, which is a little bit worrisome. But I do think that she'll be able to overwhelm Schevchenko and kind of utilize her grappling to win this fight. My lean is definitely Casey O'Neill, but I'm not taking her at 2-1 favorite odds. I'd much rather see that line continue to come down. I know a lot of people are on Schevchenko on MMA Twitter. So if that O'Neill line gets to, you know, like the minus 160 range, I might consider playing it. So right now, lean on Casey O'Neill, but I understand why people are putting money on Schevchenko. We've got a great matchup in the lightweight division between Joe Solecki and Jared Flash Gordon. Joe Solecki is one of those guys who, since entering the UFC, hasn't been met with much resistance. He's training at a Gym O with Brian Barberina and Scott Holtzman, but looks far better than both those guys, in my opinion. He's fought guys like Matt Wyman, Austin Hubbard, and Jim Miller so far in the UFC, and as I said, it kind of rolled. You know, when it gets to the ground, he looks Khabib strong. I mean, never out of place when it's on the ground, calm in situations. And you can tell by his record, he's got 7 wins by submission, and I definitely think that that's a possibility here. You look at the Jared Gordon side, He's on a 2-fight win streak, but in his last fight, he missed weight by 4 pounds. 4 pounds. So you see him moving up to lightweight against a guy in Joe Solecki who's huge and powerful and strong. And I don't think that that's a great matchup for somebody like Jared Gordon. He's only ever fought 2 other grapplers in Charles Oliveira and Diego Vieira, and both them knocked him out. I think that when Jared Gordon can't implement his own grappling game, he's a fish out of water. And I do think that Joe Solecki's going to be a little bit too much for him. On the feet, maybe he has an edge. I know he has good low kicks, and he's called Flash for a reason. He's got some quick hands, but I think that Joe Solecki's got his number, and the line keeps on dropping. It seems like people are putting money on Gordon, but I'm willing to wait that line out and play Solecki later on in the week. Our next fight takes place in the men's lightweight division, where we see Alexander Hernandez taking on Mike Breeden. Alexander Hernandez, huge letdown since his entrance into the UFC. He got a debut win over Beneil Dariush, and I know a lot of people were pretty high on him. He got that Cerrone fight, and since then he's pretty much dropped every big fight that he's been in. His latest one to Thiago Moises, who's an excellent fighter, but it's the same issues every single time with someone like Alexander Hernandez. He cannot fix that cardio, and it's always going to be a problem with him. At 5'9", he's too small to go up to 170, but he's too fucking muscled up to stay at 155. So, maybe he's going to continue to roll through guys like Chris Grutzmacher and Mike Breeden here, but until he fixes the cardio issues, which I don't think he can, I think we're going to be disappointed with him pretty much every single time that he steps up. Now, Mike Breeden, he's training out of Glory MMA, which I know a lot of people are big fans of. He usually fights at welterweight, so he's not going to be small coming into this fight whatsoever, although even at welterweight, it wasn't like he was a big one by any means. He shouldn't be as big of a dog as he is, but he also will most likely lose this fight. After watching tape, he's not exceptionally fast or powerful, but most of his wins do come by KO. I just don't think it's to the level of competition as Alexander Hernandez. I will say that Breeden definitely has the better cardio and has shown much more success in the later rounds than Hernandez, so the longer this fight goes, I think the more it'll start to lean towards Breeden, but I think Hernandez is on a different level, and we should probably see him roll here. Our next fight takes place in the women's bantamweight division, where we see Aspen Ladd taking on Macy Chiason. I'll keep this one kind of short and sweet. I think Aspen Ladd's the right side here. She has extremely powerful ground and pound, and when she gets on top of you, you're not getting back up. Barring one of the Jermaine Durandame KOs, I don't see her losing this fight. She's facing somebody in Macy Chiason who's much taller, much easier to get in on the hips, much weaker, and I could see it going very similarly to the Yana Kunitskaya fight that she just had. Over on the Macy Chiason fight, she's coming out of a good camp in Fortis MMA, but this is easily her toughest fight to date, and I think, she usually relies on being the bigger fighter and kind of overwhelming her opponents with exceptional knees in the clinch, which could definitely give Aspen Ladd some problems considering Aspen Ladd's size disadvantage here. But damn, I don't think she can stop the takedown. Like I said, if something were to happen where Chiason finds success, I gotta imagine that it's with those long punches that she throws. She is, exceptionally long for a woman, and she does throw with some power, so I could see it's women's bantamweight. Ladd could get catch. Like, I'm not dumb, but I gotta think that Ladd's the right side here. Minus 250 though, I probably won't be putting her in parlays. Again, it's a women's bantamweight fight. I don't think that I can trust it by any means, but I do think that she's the side. Our next fight takes place in the middleweight division between Misha Cirkunov versus Krzysztof Jotko. Cirkunov really disappointed us in his last fight. We took him against Ryan Spann, and he got finished in the first round. Didn't really make a good account of himself. That being said, Misha shows flashes of greatness that make it to where you can't really fade that guy. I mean, he's got an incredible squeeze. He's choked out plenty of guys in the UFC, including Nikita Krylov, Ian Cutelaba, Patrick Cummins, and Jim Crute. All pretty high level guys. As we saw in his last fight, he came in excellent shape. And honestly, it looked like he was in middleweight shape coming into that light heavyweight fight, judging by his Instagram, especially. He kind of has rudimentary striking. It doesn't look the greatest, which is why he got caught by somebody like Span. Where Krzysztof Jotko, damn, I mean, kind of an up and down career. Definitely doesn't have any wins that impress me whatsoever. I think his best win, you could call it, is the win over Eric Anders or the split over Marc-Andre Barrett. But Misha's his toughest test or would be his biggest win to date by a long shot, in my opinion. I do think that Jotko has the speed edge over somebody like Misha, but he'll likely get overpowered in these grappling situations. He is kind of small for the division, and I could see this fight going very similar to the Nikita Krylov fight with Misha Cirkunov, where Cirkunov is just able to overpower him in the grappling situations and kind of get the fight where he needs it to. I think that Jotko also has a better gas tank. So I'll give him 1, speed, and 2, gas tank. So the longer this fight goes, I think that there might be a live betting opportunity on Jotko. But as it sits right now, with Misha Cirkunov being the underdog, I think that he is probably the play. Not that it's a heavy play at all, but I do think he's getting overlooked here. We've got an absolute banger coming up in the welterweight division between Niko Price and Alex Cowboy Oliveira. It's really easy to make comparisons between both these guys. Both of them have been in their fair share of wars and made a name for themselves by coming out on top of those. They also really long frames for the division, and it's allowed them opportunities for submissions like the Darce choke and a couple more that allow them to utilize their their length. Niko, I just think, is at a different point in his career. Cowboy Oliveira, he's still making mistakes that you'd hope that he had kind of fixed at 33 years old with the amount of damage that he's taken, but he's still throwing strikes with his chin straight up in the air. When you take losses to guys like Yancy Medeiros, Mike Perry, Randy Brown, it's not a good look. I get that he's a legend, but I do think that he's a little overhyped when you look down his record. He really doesn't have many notable wins. I really like the straight right from Niko Price. I think that that's somewhere that he could catch Alex Oliveira and kind of start the sequence, a finishing sequence. But like I said, I think Niko Price is at a different point in his career. It's gonna be a dirty fight, but this is our play of the night, and I think Niko Price will show you that he's the rightful favorite. We've got a great matchup for the co-main event in the middleweight division, where we see Kevin Holland taking on Kyle Daukaus. Kevin Holland's coming off of 2 pretty disappointing losses where he just laid on his back for 10 rounds straight. He took on Derek Brunson first and made 0 improvements to the Marvin Vettori fight. And it might just be a situation where Kevin Holland isn't a true 185er, and when he faces guys that have a grappling advantage and are a true 185er, he just doesn't have the strength to hang with them. We kind of see the same thing in Kyle Daukaus, where when he's fighting stronger grapplers, he just doesn't have anything to offer for them. Both these guys are 6'3", and they both keep a similar pace and kind of look to overwhelm their opponents or create scrambles where they can wind up in a dominant position. Both guys are Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belts, so I gotta imagine that the scrambles are going to be crazy. But Kevin Holland has definitely seen the better competition, and I do slightly lean him. I know that Preston does as well, but it's just one of those ones where, yeah, we both lean Holland, but after those last 2 performances, it's really tough to want to back him. And it's just kind of a point where we're going to see how this one plays out so that we can try and gauge future bets on Holland and Daukaus. We think it'll be an excellent fight. As far as the striking goes, I think that Daukaus has a much tighter boxing style of striking, where Holland utilizes his reach more, utilizes more leg kicks that create distance and longer punches. Ultimately, I think I'm going to officially pick Holland, but like I said, we're going to lay off for the podcast. We move on to the main event in the light heavyweight division between two absolute brutes in Thiago Santos versus Johnny Walker. Thiago Santos, known for his power, if nothing else, and Johnny Walker, kind of known to be chinny. I think this is one that both P and I see going relatively the same. That first round TKO prop at plus 450 for Thiago Santos is money, in my opinion. Johnny Walker has zero patience, and that's something that you have to have in a fight with Thiago Santos. Like we saw in the Rakic fight with Thiago Santos, you can't leave yourself exposed. Rakic played the perfect game plan, which was not leaving himself open for being connected with one of those Santos shots. Johnny Walker, on the other hand, if he finds any success, he'll rush at you with his hands down, and he just doesn't have the chin for it. You know, I've seen clips of him getting knocked out 4 times in a fight, and I'll give it to him. He has the recovery time to wake right back up, but dude's chin is shot, and even though he's under 30 years old, he's fighting guys where that, you know, margin of error just isn't available anymore. You know, Thiago Santos is not one that's forgiving with his shots. I think that the lead left hook of Thiago Santos is going to absolutely destroy Johnny Walker, just like it did Glover Teixeira. I think that he's going to catch him with that lead left hook, and Johnny Walker is going to be flatlined in the first round. All that being said, I'm not stupid. Like, I'm not overlooking Johnny Walker's athletic ability. I could also see him kind of come in there with like some jumping oblique kick and try and fuck up Santos's knees again. I don't have much hope for Johnny Walker's future, especially if he continues to fight the way that he fights. He was lucky to get the finish in that Ryan Spann fight, but he got caught bad by Spann's lead left hook, and kind of got lucky, in my opinion. So I think that Santos is the side here, and I'm happy that we're at least taking the stab on that first round TKO. That concludes this week's breakdowns for the Early Weigh-In podcast. I did talk it over with Preston, and we are going to put the casual cap on the Antonina Schevchenko versus Casey O'Neill fight. He's got a lean for Schevchenko, so I was more than happy to take O'Neill in that spot. That is it for it. We will be back next week, the both of us, so we'll see you then. Thanks for watching. Peace.